Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Katie. Today I'm going to be sharing my top 15 favorite fall DIYs that I've ever done. It's going to be another little roundup here on my channel of my favorite DIYs I've done in the past couple of years for the fall season, and I thought this would be just like a really fun way to kick off the season here. Even if you're not ready to start decorating for fall right now, it's just a good way to kind of get some inspiration and see what you might want to make this year. So over the next few weeks, I'll be making a ton of brand new fall DIYs that you've never seen before, but I kind of just wanted to do a look back here and share some of my all-time favorites. So I hope you'll enjoy them, and let's go ahead and get started. So I'm using this terracotta air dry clay that I used a few videos back, and I got this on Amazon. I'll link it again down below, but I just ripped off a piece of it and then started to roll it out with my clay rolling pin. As far as the thickness goes, I'm not gonna make it too thin because I'm making coasters and I want it to be substantial and sturdy enough to be able to hold a cup, a mug, or maybe even a candle. So I'm using this marble coaster that I have just as my template or my stencil, and I push it down into the clay. Then I took my X-Acto knife and I cut around all the edges of the marble coaster, and you want to press pretty hard because you want a nice clean edge when you tear the clay out of like the surrounding clay. So my edges were not perfect. I wish I pressed a little bit harder, but it's no big deal. I went back in with my X-Acto knife and just cut off those little pieces you can kind of see like sticking off of the corner, and that worked out perfectly fine. And the next step is to just take some water on your finger or a paintbrush and smooth out the clay to get out any little bumps or cracks or anything like that. So I went over the whole top of it as well as the edges to make it nice and smooth. The next thing that I grabbed was this faux wheat, and at first I was gonna press it in and remove it to make an imprint, but then once I pressed it in, I thought it looked really cool, the two colors together and the contrast, so I decided to leave it there and then just cut off the excess. So I cut off everything that wasn't stuck into the clay, and then I just let these dry for a few hours outside. You can also let them dry overnight, but I think they look so cool, really chic and high-end, very trendy. I love the colors. I'm so happy with how these turned out. So I have been dying to make a custom doormat, and I saw this one on Pottery Barn that I loved. So I actually found a just plain doormat at Target for $6.99. It was on sale, but they sell for about $10 generally. And I used my Cricut to make this stencil to say gather. But if you don't have a cutting machine, you can just get letter stencils at the craft store. I did this all the time before I had my Cricut. So whatever you choose to do, you're just going to put the stencil right in the middle of your doormat. And then I'm using a couple of different sponge little like brushes to sort of just dab the paint right into the doormat and get it really into the fibers. It took me about 2 coats. I have a covered front porch, so I'm just using my regular acrylic paint. And then once I'm done with that, I'm just removing the stencil and the little pieces that were in the letters like H and T and G. And then what I'm doing is using some stencils that I got at the craft store. These are not sticky, so I taped them down with a little bit of painter's tape and then just sort of held it down with my hand. And again, used the same dabbing technique with my sponge brush. And I was not very particular about where I was placing all of these leaves because I wanted it to look like what I saw online. It sort of looked like the leaves had just fallen onto the doormat every which way. So that was really fun because you don't have to be too specific about where you're placing them. And I really liked how this turned out. I think it's beautiful and would make a great gift or perfect seasonal decor. To create some canvas art, so I kind of created this little compass type thing here and just drew a half circle on the bottom of my canvas, and then I used the leftover paint from the candle because I had a pretty good amount left and I didn't want to waste it. So I went ahead and painted this half circle, and to me it kind of reminded me of a sunset or a sunrise. So I thought this would be really pretty, but instead of drawing on the rays of the sun, I thought I could use this dried wheat instead, and that would be really cool. So I just cut them to the length that I wanted them to be according to the size of my canvas, and then I hot glued them and tried to keep them evenly spaced, and I thought this looked really nice. I decided to add a few more shorter pieces in between the longer ones, and that is all you have to do. It's super simple, but looks really, really pretty. I found these little pumpkins at the craft store and they were like $1, and I really did not like everything that was going on with them, all of this embellishment. So I decided to take all of that off, and then I'm going to make 2 different types of pumpkins. This first one, I'm using an X-Acto knife to just carve out a hole in the top of it, and this is just styrofoam underneath, so it's pretty easy to pop out. And then kind of want to just carve it out so it's decent size. And then I have an old sweater that I was going to donate, so instead I cut off the sleeve of it, and I'm going to use that to wrap around the pumpkin. So I'm sliding the pumpkin right inside, and then the cuff of the sleeve I'm going to tuck down into that hole that I carved out. So you want to make sure that you're pushing that cuff in pretty well into the hole as much as you can, and then pull the rest of the sweater tight on the bottom of the pumpkin, and then flip it over and cut off the excess. You want to leave a little bit, because what you're going to do is add some hot glue to the bottom and just glue those sort of loose ends down so that you can rest your pumpkin on the bottom and it will be balanced. Now for this part, you can use anything you want. I had these leftover little like bottom parts of these wheat stalks, so I just added some glue to the whole of the pumpkin, and I glued a bunch of these together into that. And then I did take some of these leaves that I had taken off originally and added them back on, just for a tiny bit of embellishment, nothing crazy like it was at the start, but I just sort of arranged them and glued them down, and I think this looks so cute. For the next one, I wanted to try something different that I've never really seen before. So basically I added a bit of hot glue and then started to wrap the yarn around this little pumpkin in all different directions. This did take a little while, but not too long. So I just continued wrapping it, and then I would kind of twist the pumpkin and wrap the other way. And I kind of followed like the little indents that were naturally in this pumpkin to use as a guide for where I was wrapping it. But once I got it all wrapped up, I just cut off the excess and glued it down along the bottom. And then I went out in the yard and I just got a piece of a stick and glued that right on top to make the stem. And I added in a few little things that I had taken off of it. So these little tiny like pine cones and another leaf. But yeah, I think these look much better than the original, and it was a pretty simple upgrade. So I found a scrap piece of leather and a piece of cork, and I took one of the coasters that I already had, I just traced it onto the piece of cork, and this is going to be the backing of the coaster. So I'm just gonna make 2 for this project. So I'm cutting out the cork squares, and then you can trim them up as you need to once you get it all cut out. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with the leather by tracing the coaster onto the back of the leather and cutting it out. I'm using some Mod Podge. You can use really any type of glue that you have, but something that's thin. So I'm just spreading a layer of Mod Podge all over the back of the cork and then laying down the leather right on top of it. So it looks really nice already, but what I wanted to do is make it a little bit more fall. So I decided to do some stenciling, and I had these leaf stencils. You might have seen me use them on my doormat in my last video. And I'm testing out this paint process on a scrap piece of leather before I do it on the coaster. I always recommend doing that. It worked out well, so I moved on to the real thing, and you just want to use a very thin layer of paint. I'm using a metallic sort of coppery paint, but a thin layer is good so it doesn't bleed through the stencil. And then if you want to, you can seal it with a clear layer of some sort of like Mod Podge to keep it resistant to water and things like that. remember this bright orange leaf bowl. I started off by toning it down and painting it with my favorite matte terracotta spray paint. And I think this just instantly elevates the look of a piece. So I gave it a few coats on the top and bottom. It's already looking so much better and more chic, but to give it even more detail, I went in with this antique gold rub and buff, which is basically like metallic paint. You only need a very tiny amount and then you just go in and add some gold detail wherever you'd like. I decided to accentuate the stem and some of the tips of the leaf, as well as a few of the indentations in the middle of the bowl. I didn't want this to look too perfect, more so like it's aged a bit, so I very lightly sanded down some of the gold spots to finish it off. I'm so excited with how this turned out, and I think it's such a big difference with just a few simple steps. Not make a wreath, so I'm using this gold hoop, which I'll link down below, as well as some more eucalyptus. And then I'm going to make this sort of like an asymmetrical wreath. So I'm just adding it on one side with some floral wire to keep it in place, and then some faux wheat, and I'm just wrapping everything together using my floral wire. And then lastly, I decided to add a few little flowers as well, just to finish it off. You could really use anything that fits your style, any color tones and things like that. And to give it a little something extra, I wanted to add this ribbon. So I had this crushed velvet ribbon, which I think is so beautiful. I love the color of it. So I just wrapped it right around where all that wire is to hide it, made a simple knot, and that's it. Now you can hang it up. Oh, and if you do want to hang it up by something a little fancier than just the hoop, you can also use a piece of faux leather and just glue it right to the hoop. And then I use my leather punch to just punch a hole, so now I can hang it up by a nail in the wall, and it's super easy and beautiful. Next thing I'm going to try to attempt to make are some Birch candles. So these are flameless candles, they're battery operated, and they're actually waxy on the outside. They feel like a real candle. They're not made of plastic, so you wanna make sure that you find something that you can sort of like cut into, because what we're gonna do is cut them with an X-Acto knife and just sort of make little slice marks all around it. But I'll try to find some online if I can, like on Amazon, and link them for you guys. So yeah, I'm basically just gonna take my X-Acto knife, be really careful here, but I'm just going to make little like slits all over it at different levels. You don't want to make it look perfect because of course birch wouldn't be perfect in nature. So just kind of start making small like little lines all over it, all different sizes. This might be a little bit tedious, but like I said, with this waxy finish, it's like super easy to cut into. You can make some of these a little bit bigger than others and also like a little bit deeper than others, because you kind of want it to look authentic, of course, as much as we can. So I'm gonna actually try to create almost a notch with some of these. So I'm creating sort of like a curved circle on it, and then I'll just kind of dig out the wax from it. I feel like you could also do this on a real candle if you wanted to, but I just like the flameless. I'm gonna be using paint and stuff like that, so I don't want to really light something that I've painted. But if you just wanted to use it purely as a decor piece and not light it ever, you could definitely just get a real candle as well. Okay, that looks really good so far. It's kind of hard to tell if it's going to look authentic or not, but from here it looks pretty good, so I hope it does. Now I'm gonna go in and fill in all the little cracks, little holes that I made using this gel wood stain. You could probably also use brown paint or any sort of wood stain that you have. See, I've just added a little bit of this to this container. I'm going to use a sponge brush to sort of try to fill this into the cracks. Okay, I'm kind of nervous, but I think it'll wipe away easily if I mess up, so I'm just gonna go for it. Yeah, okay, so I wanna dab it inside of those lines and it like sinks down inside. And then what I'm gonna do is get a wet cloth and wipe away the part that's left like on the outside of the candle. So I'm gonna fill a couple of these in, and before it dries, I'm gonna go get a cloth and see if that works. I kind of just wiped all around it. Actually wiped right over top of it, and it wipes right off, but it stays inside that line, which is so good. That looks pretty natural actually. Okay, yes, that is looking so good. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill in the rest of them. But I do like how this gel stain is working, and it wipes away easily, so that's awesome. It's also easier to control than like a liquid wood stain. I like the gel because it's kind of like a mix between paint and a traditional wood stain. All of the little slices that I made with my X-Acto knife have been filled in, and this is looking so cool. I'm kind of going back and forth with whether I want to paint it, but I just did like a little test area and it looks really good, so I'll show you what I did. I think I'm gonna end up doing that on the whole thing. And if I don't like it with paint, you can just wipe it off, so it's not a big deal. So I'm going to just mix some of the brown stain with this kind of like creamy off-white color, and then just try to create like a beige, sort of like tan color. I'm just gonna start painting it all around the outside, and it's just going to give it the lightest coat of this grayish brown color. And I might even wipe some of it off, just like I did with the stain, so that it doesn't look like it's been painted, but it does have that sort of like color tint to it. So yeah, it's like a little bit overly painted in my opinion. I don't want it to look like that. So what I'm gonna do is just take the same cloth that I used to wipe the stain off, and I'm just gonna lightly wipe where I just painted. I'm just gonna wipe it off just enough so that you still have some of that paint coverage on it. You can also go back in and fill in any parts that maybe look like a little bit too light. So yeah, I like that a little bit better because now you can still see these little slats, but it's also not totally painted. It's got a little bit of color to it, and it's more than just the original color of the candle, so it looks a little bit more natural. And again, if you don't like the way it looks, just wet your cloth a little bit. Paint rubs off so easily, especially on this type of surface. So it's no big deal if you mess up. Okay, I feel like this looks so good. So some things that I learned is that you definitely want to cut your little cracks like a little bit deeper, because that'll really let the gel stain settle into it or whatever you're using. And then for these bigger parts, the stain didn't hold as well, but I kind of liked that. It just sort of gave like a little bit of an idea that there's kind of like knots in the wood, but it's not too dark, not too much darker than the rest of it. So yeah, those would be my little tips, but all in all, I think this looks awesome. So I think the candles on Pottery Barn range from $65 to $90 for one candle. This was $10 to make at the most. So you could make a whole set of these for the same price as it costs for one candle from Pottery Barn. So that's pretty awesome. So I thought it would be fun to make a geometric wall hanging. So I got some oven baked clay in sort of this darker bronze color. And then what I'm going to do is just warm it up in my hands. And then I used a glass bottle to roll it out. And then once you've rolled it out, you can take something circular. So I'm just using a small little glass that I have. You can use a cookie cutter. Basically, you just want to make a circular shape. And then I'm taking a ruler and just using my X-Acto knife to cut a straight line right down the middle. So you essentially want to create two half moon shapes. And then you'll need to make some holes for hanging it up. So I'm taking a pencil and just trying to keep the holes in the middle, one on the top and one on the bottom. And you need to do this for all of them. You can make as many as you want. I made 4 of these shapes. So once you've got your shapes cut out, you can bake them according to the package instructions, and then it's time to make tassels. So to do this, I'm making the simplest tassel. I'm just wrapping some embroidery thread around a piece of cardboard. A bunch of times, the more you wrap it, the thicker your tassel will be. But once you've finished wrapping it, you can just cut off the excess and then cut one extra piece, slide the yarn off of the cardboard, and then lay it down on top of that extra piece. Tie a double knot around it, and then take scissors and slide them through the little loop at the bottom and then cut it away. And then you can trim the tassel as much as you need to and try to make the ends even. And I made 3 of these. Now to hang them up, I took a piece of yarn and I made a knot, a little loop at the top, and then I strung a bead on, and then I strung each of the shapes on. So I took the yarn and I put it through the front of the shape and then down the back and then through the hole from the back. So basically I'm just stringing on a bead and then one of the shapes, and then I'm finishing off by stringing on the tassels, and then I'm going to kind of take the yarn across the tassels and tie a knot around itself so that everything stays in place. From here, you can adjust the length of the tassels if you need to or if you want to by trimming them, but after you've tied your double knot to keep them in place, it's all ready for you to hang up. You know, I love candles right now, so I had this glass jar that I've had for years and I thought it would be perfect, as well as this terracotta chalk paint that I got on Amazon. It is my favorite right now, so I added a little bit of baking soda to it to give it some texture, and then I just went ahead and started painting my glass jar. I'm gonna give it one light coat just to cover the entire thing. Then you'll wanna let it dry in between coats, so it takes like 20 minutes to half an hour to really dry fully, and then go ahead and add another coat. I think I did 3 coats total to give it some really nice coverage and texture. While that was drying, I melted my wax. So this is soy wax. I got it on Amazon, and for reference, I think I used about half of the bag for this pretty big candle. So I just created a double boiler situation with some water in the pot underneath and the wax in this measuring cup, a glass measuring cup on top, until it was fully melted. And then I added a bunch of drops of one of my favorite essential oils. You can do any type of essential oil that you want, whatever scent that you like for the season that you're in. Then I gave it a good stir, and I'm using these wood wicks, which I think are really cool. And again, I got them on Amazon, as usual, no big surprise. So I basically like to dip the base of it into the wax instead of gluing it down. So I put 2 of the wicks in each base because they said that would help it to burn better. I dipped it in the wax, and then I just pressed it down and held it there until the wax dried. And now your wicks are going to be stuck to the bottom of the jar for when you pour your wax in. So then I just slowly poured the wax into my candle, and I used the perfect amount. It filled it right up to where I wanted it to be. So then you're going to want to let that cool completely so that it will harden, and then you can go ahead and trim the wicks. And I decided to add a little bit of embellishment. So as you can see, there were some blank spaces with my paint here that were a bit lighter, but I wasn't worried about it because I knew I was going to cover it up. So I got this fringe, and then I just glued it right to the top of the jar. And I think this looks really pretty, just gives it that boho vibe on top of the terracotta textured paint. And you can do 1 or 2 rows of it, whatever you like. I kind of liked the 2 rows. It made it feel a little more boho, but as always, you can personalize this. And this is so fun, cozy, and smells amazing. So I have a bag of craft pumpkins from Amazon. I will link them down below. They're a really good price. And then I mixed together a bunch of different paints, these ones that you see on the right, to make this sort of like pinkish color, which I think is really pretty. So I'm actually adding baking soda to it because we're gonna do that baking soda faux terracotta look. So basically for the first coat, you just want to do a very thin coat just to make sure you're covering the entire thing. You don't need to lay it on thick yet. Then you can go ahead and set that aside to dry for maybe half an hour to an hour. And then I'm gonna get started on my next one. So for the second one, I'm actually going to carve out a hole in the center using my X-Acto knife. So I removed the stem, it just pulled right out. And then this is foam, so it's super easy to cut. And you can just cut a little hole in the center if you'd like to make it into like a little succulent planter, or I'm going to put some faux florals inside. So once that was all cut out, then it was time to paint this one, and I mixed together a few paints to give this sort of orangey color. It actually looks really similar to terracotta when it dries. I can't wait for you guys to see it. But I mixed together orange, red, this sort of like bronzy copper color, and white to get this. So now I'm gonna go ahead and do the second coat, and this is where you really want to layer the paint on pretty thick. Because of the baking soda, you'll see that texture form to give you that faux terracotta clay look, which looks so amazing and incredible. So once it's all dry, then you can add in your little plant or whatever you want to this one with the hole in the center. Like I said, a fake succulent will look really cute. I'm going to do these faux florals, and you can just do it for, you know, whatever colors you like, whatever tones. I think this is a fun way to decorate a tablescape, a little windowsill. There are so many options you can use for these, and I think they just look stunning. You can play around with the colors. That's my favorite part, is mixing all different colors and then just styling them up. I think they look amazing. next thing that I've been seeing everywhere right now is polymer clay earrings. They are definitely super trendy at the moment. So I decided to make some, and I really loved this design for fall. I love the color, I love the paint pattern, just everything about it. And I actually had a really similar color of clay already. So I grabbed some of that and just rolled it out again with my clay rolling pin. And I also had these little like letter cutters for clay that I got last year. And so the U was perfect for the upside down U shape, and it just worked out perfectly. To make the little round circle part, I have this sponge brush, and I just took the paintbrush part out of it and used this to make an indent, but you could really use anything that's a small circular shape. So I just repeated this process, making another U and another circle for the second earring. And then I also had some jewelry making jump rings on hand, so I grabbed a couple of those. This is what I'll be using to connect all of the pieces together. So I opened up an extra jump ring and just pushed it into each of the U shapes at the top, and then also a hole at the top and bottom of each of the circles. And then once I did that, I baked them. So you can follow the package instructions to bake them. Once they are all cooled, it's time to decorate them, and I used a little toothpick to get this little line design with the white paint. I found this was perfect because I needed something really thin to make those precise line shapes. So this is what they look like. Then all you have to do is put the jump rings on, and they are ready to wear. So I decided to actually try out the paint and baking soda method that everyone is doing on bases, but to do it on canvas instead. I thought this would be really cool. So I mixed up my own paint color. I did a little bit of red and this sort of like rose gold copper color, some white, and then I added in some orange. I wanted like a really nice fall autumnal burnt orange color. Then I added in my baking soda, and I did not measure it. I just kind of went by sight to see how thick it was, and I wanted it pretty thick so that I can get that nice textured look on my canvas. So I got a big pack of these canvases on Amazon because I knew I wanted to test out some different methods. So for this first one, I decided to start by just covering the whole thing with a thin layer of this baking soda paint mixture. And then once the whole canvas was totally covered, I went back in and layered on more paint and just did it thicker and thicker each time. So you can see here I'm sort of like not spreading it into the canvas super thin. I'm letting it just rest on top, and I dragged my brush around and kind of stippled it a little bit to get that really nice texture. This is totally something you have to play around with and just get how you want it to look. But I thought this looked really, really cool. I love the texture that it gave. For the next one, I wanted to do more of an off-white. So I did white and gold paint together. And this one, I did a different twist on it. So I laid on this paint really, really thick onto the canvas right off the bat. And then I have this little tiny like rake. I got it at the craft store a while ago, and you could use a fork or really anything that has like tines. And I decided to just drag it through the paint at different angles. So I started doing some vertical lines, and then I did some more like swirly lines, and then I did these arches here at the top, and I think this turned out so unique and really cool. I also wanted to do sort of a modern twist on a wreath, so I'm taking some skinny dowel rods and I'm just forming them into a triangle shape and kind of overlapping them at the corners. Then I'm taking some hot glue and gluing them down just to keep them secure. But to dress it up a little bit, I'm going to wrap some leather cord around each of the corners. Now for this, you can use rope, you can use yarn, you can really use anything you want. So I'm just going to glue it down, wrap it around a few times, and then glue it down again so that it stays in place, and then cut off the excess. I really love the look of this leather on here because I think it fits with my fall tones, but like I said, you can use anything or any color that you want. Now I'm gathering up my florals, and I've got some eucalyptus here and then some different peach and orange flowers. I'm trying, most of these DIYs I'm noticing are like in the peachy pink sort of color scheme with a little bit of orange, and I really like that for fall this year. So I'm just adding the flowers on over the eucalyptus with some hot glue, and you can arrange them however you want. And then you can hang this up, you can prop it up on a table. There are a lot of different ways that you can display it, and I think it's really pretty. The last thing that I want to try to create is this fall sign, and it says fall is in the air, and it has some leaves and acorns around it. I just think it's really cute and would look good in my entryway. So I think using my Cricut, I can DIY it. You could certainly create your own stencils or use letter stencils from the craft store as well. You don't need a Cricut for this, but I'm going to use mine for it to make it a little bit easier. But the original is over $100, and I just know we can make this for a lot less. So I played around in Design Space, that's the app that comes with your Cricut, and you can play around with all the different fonts and the images that you can add in. I just created some custom stencils, so that's super fun and easy to create pretty much any type of sign that you want to. So I've got my little tiny Cricut Joy here, and I'm going to print out each of my stencils. Okay, my stencils have been cut. I'm always surprised at how easy that is. I've got my stencil on the paper. It's a little bit hard to see because it's white, but it is there. So I decided I'm gonna do the words first and then take this stencil off and then add the leaves in after, just to make it a little bit easier. So what I'm gonna do now is just mix up some paint colors. So I've added red, orange, and yellow here, and I'm just gonna try to mix it up and get as close as I can to the color in the original one on Pottery Barn, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm just gonna use this little sponge brush. I think that's gonna be the easiest to start the first word, and I'm just gonna sponge it right on. You wanna make sure that your stencil is pressed really well into the paper. You can use like a little credit card or something like that if you don't have a tool specifically for that, but you just wanna make sure that you do that so that no paint seeps under the edges of the stencil. And you don't need to add too much paint to your sponge. The more you add, the more likely it is to seep underneath, like I was talking about. So start with a thin layer just to be careful, and you can always add more later. Also, if you guys missed my Cricut video, I did a whole video a couple of weeks back about my Cricut Joy and how I like it and what I use it for. So if you are interested in one, you can check out that video. There's links there and everything if you want to take a look. Okay, my first word is done. It looked like the one on Pottery Barn. It kind of almost went with like this ombre vibe. So it went down from red to a lighter red to almost like a green at the bottom. I might try to do it a little bit. I'll just start the top of the next words with the red and stop like 3/4 of the way down, because then maybe I can add some yellow or something to the paint to lighten it up a little bit, and that way I can do kind of like my own sort of ombre effect. Okay, now for the moment of truth. I don't know why this part always makes me so nervous, but I'm gonna lift the stencil off and hope that nothing seeped through and that it looks good. Okay, I feel like I've seriously impressed myself. These colors look so good. I wasn't sure how the layering ombre type thing would go. It worked and it looks really cool. So now all I have to do is add on the leaf stencils. I wish I had more of a brown color for the acorns. Unfortunately, I don't. So I'm gonna mix together some copper and some green, and I think it's gonna make maybe a brown color. You know, you just use what you have. It doesn't have to be perfect. And really just have fun with this and just sort of play around with it. And you can always test it out first on a separate piece of paper if you want to know if your color is going to look good. I think I'm going to style this in my entryway because this piece of paper I showed you had the watercolor on the back. That came from my entryway. So I think I'll just put it back, but with this inside, it'll be so good for fall. Okay, we just have to wait for this to dry, and then I'll peel them off for the final reveal, and then I'll pop it in the frame and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, you guys know the drill, and this is gonna be really fun because there are so many DIYs to choose from in this batch, so let me know in the comments down below which one of these 15 DIYs was your favorite, or if you have more than one. I always like to hear that too, so leave your vote in the comments down below. And as always, make sure you guys are following me on Instagram. I do unique tutorials over there that you don't always see on my YouTube channel, and I share behind the scenes footage of things that I'm making for the upcoming week, so it's just a lot of fun, so I would love it if you guys would follow me over there. Again, it's just my name @KatieBookser, and make sure you are subscribed to my channel. I believe I've got IKEA hacks coming up next week, so you don't want to miss out on that. So make sure you are subscribed, hit the little bell notification so you're one of the first people to know whenever I upload a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy fall almost, and I'll see you soon.